Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 170, our season 6 finale, with the folks from Mongoose talking about modernizing student outreach through things like chatbots and texting and kind of omni-channel communications. So really fun conversation. They are fellow podcasters. We are linking out to their show in the show notes that you should definitely check out, called For Your Institution, or FYI. So yeah, just really fun, lively conversation, but very relevant. Always good to be thinking about how are you reaching out to your students smarter, at the right things at the right time in the right modality. But this is also an important episode, as it's a season finale. We will not be posting any kind of new regular episodes. There may be some special bonus and rebroadcast episodes next month before we are back with season 7 in January. And there's more fun news that should be coming out in the coming months and weeks as well. For the show moving forward into the future. But we've also been doing this show for 5 years as of this month of November, which is wild. So this is kind of just a spiritual successor to the Student Affairs Collective podcast for anybody who has listened all the way back since then. Thank you so much for sticking with me. But this has just been such an incredible opportunity for me to continue doing something that I really enjoy, talking about the field and work that I am so passionate about. And this is something that has just led to some really awesome opportunities for full-time work and freelance jobs and meeting just incredible people. So I'm very grateful for everyone that's given time to be a guest, to listen, to share out the show, to buy merch and all that good stuff. So really excited for the future to come and just to keep finding new incredible opportunities to kind of be of service to the field, moderating and facilitating these conversations. And again, thank you all so much for listening and supporting the show. So with all of that, without further ado, here is our season 6 finale, episode 170, with the fine folks from Mongoose. So we have 2 great folks with us today as our guests for the podcast, which is always a treat to have more than one person just to bring in more perspectives on a singular topic. So really excited for this to talk. Something that I can never get enough of really is how we sort of communicate and reach out to students, connect with them, share information and make sure that they are set up for success as possible in a myriad of ways, whether it's, earlier in their journey or as they are preparing to graduate and enter the workforce and all that good stuff. So we will start out as we always do with introductions and overviews of professional backgrounds, how our guests got to be where they are today. So we'll start with you, Mike, and then go to you, Greg.
Yeah, well, I'm Mike Kuczynski. I'm the Client Engagement Manager here at Mongoose. And spent my entire career in and around higher education.
You got to keep this under 20 minutes.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
So there's Canisius College, University at Buffalo, Towson University, Loyola University, Maryland.
You're already doing a terrible job.
Yes. And then came back to Canisius, and now I'm at Mongoose. But I've always worked in and around student engagement on college campuses. Some of that's been in athletics, some of that's been in admissions and undergraduate recruiting, some of that's been in grad recruiting, really kind of been all over the board, even some annual giving and alumni engagement. So very excited to talk about students and engagement and digital engagement and all the things you have for us today, Dustin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Mike failed to talk about how much he knows. Mike knows a lot. I like having him as a co-host and colleague. I am nervous being on a Higher Ed Geek podcast because I'm not a geek. I'm not
You're
techie.
geeky.
I'm a communication person. So I started out in radio and communications, did some stand-up, got into marketing, and basically my life is a lesson how no one cares about you unless you're giving them what they want. And you can resent that, or you can do what you need to do to help people. So I specialize in, communicating in a way that helps someone and getting to the point as soon as possible.
Beautiful. Yeah. So you do both host a podcast together for Mongoose, which I think is just great. Always love to see more folks doing this, and can already tell that the banter will be off the charts for today's episode, which I'm very excited for. Just for folks to have a quick context, to kind of explain a bit of what Mongoose does. So if you want to kind of give the elevator pitch on that, we'll start with you on this one, Greg, and then Mike, if you have anything to chime in with, we can give you some space here as well.
Sure. Mongoose enables the right communications with the right people at the right times. We help students, alumni, and staff reach their goals and aspirations. We do that through an engagement platform called Cadence.
Yes, and it's really about making every message count, whether it's chat bots, whether it is through texting, but making sure that every message is impactful and guides the student, alumnus, alumna, parent, whoever, faculty member, to the next step, whatever needs to be done.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think this is something that we're, thankfully seeing a lot more of showing up in higher education. I think people are familiar with this, these sort of tools from, any myriad of websites that they might go to in, their day-to-day life. But, for students, it's such a unique experience. They're, deeply engaged in their studies for however long they're at the institution and are just going to need a lot of support, need a lot of different things at different moments from different people. So exactly kind of what you're saying, Greg, is, very reassuring to hear, tools that are sort of really contouring around students to get them exactly what they need. So, we are experiencing, though, sort of a moment where, students are increasingly entirely online or hybrid to varying extents, having some classes be fully online courses while they're living on campus and all these sort of things. So, they're on campus, they're out working, they're, perhaps adult learners and all these different makeups of students with different needs and different ways they need to be communicated with and connected with. So, this current landscape that's been sort of, very much disrupted over the past couple of years. What do you think? How do you get kind of your arms around this current landscape? We'll start with you on this one, Mike, and then we'll kind of segue into sort of the best practices, but just sort of like, what's the snapshot of kind of what you're seeing out in the kind of the higher ed landscape right now when it comes to the student communication?
Yeah. When we talk about the last few years, that's usually code for COVID and the pandemic and the changes institutions need to make. And this might be a hot take. Here to hear first, Dustin. I think COVID-19, the pandemic, a lot of the changes that institutions need to make, those events were accelerants. They weren't game changers. There were institutions who were positioned to be very digital or digital first, and there were institutions that were not, and the ones that were not had to catch up pretty quickly. But I think regardless of the technology you're using, the engagement you're using, students require more personalization than before. This generation in particular, Gen Z, has a higher level of expectation compared to previous generations. So I think personalization is important. I also think that making sure that the messaging and the language, every piece of content that your institution is putting out is very impactful and easy to understand. We had guests on our podcast yesterday who talked about acronyms and language and institutions seeming to take pride in using admissions terms, and they discourage that. And I would completely agree. It should be very easy for students, parents, alumni, whoever, to see what they need to do, when they need to do it, how to do it, and to know the next steps. And I think one of the aims for Mongoose with Cadence is we want there to be a channel there for people who do need that additional human support. So the things that can be automated and are easy, and staff can focus on the more difficult, tricky human things.
You didn't give the link to our podcast. You got to give the link.
We will put that in the show notes, but so don't worry about that. You don't have to like recite the whole URL.
I did want to add one note to that, Dustin, although Mike spoke very eloquently. Higher ed folks listening to this, whether it's keeping students or attracting students, you're also competing against just brands and how well they communicate with students, and the world as it is now, as people questioning whether or not they should even go to school. Should I go back to school to further my career? What should I do? So schools need to help them through that process, or they're going to decide not to. So it's very big decisions are being made. So the technology you mentioned, everything has to be on point, just because you're competing against constant bombardment with messages. It's unbelievable. How many messages you get a day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of noise out there, and, for better or worse, Gen Z has come up in this world where, we all get sort of personalized recommendations, tailor made and served right up to us and all that. And, I think that is like, it's a positive thing. I think there's also something to be said for sort of just like, stumbling upon something or whatever else. But regardless, yeah, like they want things that are sort of personalized, like you said. So like those are sort of, yeah, some of the big takeaways is like, how do you break through the noise? How do you personalize it? And, the different, mediums. And I do think like, the more friction and hurdles that students have to like push through, eventually they are just going to give up because they're like, yeah, it's not worth it, or,
Mhm.
those sort of things. And it's just a heightened level of scrutiny to begin with, and then sometimes it's just not even that much that's just going to have somebody just kind of give up because it's like, yeah, I can go do any number of other things in my life so easily. Like, why does this have to be so hard? Or, looking for an answer to something, I've been combing over the website or, whatever else. So,
We're talking about this in the scope of technology, but I think on campuses, one of the things that institutions need to realize is, um, students at most campuses have a variety and choices on how they could spend their time. So yes, every second that they are combing on a website, that they are doing something they don't want to do, pulls them away from something much more enjoyable. And in my experience, oftentimes administrators, through no fault of their own, they expect certain student behavior. They expect students to go to particular events or do certain student organizations, etc. But if those experiences aren't great, aren't unique, aren't special, aren't delightful, the students won't show up. And it's important that technology also reflect a great experience on campus for the students.
that's something just generally, you have to kind of like get outside of yourself a little bit, is like challenging assumptions about, because I think that's sometimes where, traditionally people think about, when you're just sort of like, okay, every student who has like, submitted an application, they've been accepted or whatever, we're just sending mass emails that just say like, go do the things and do all that or whatever. And it's like, how about you maybe like challenge your assumptions as to like, is that really breaking through the noise, for all the students? Can you figure out, you know, uh, who isn't doing what you need them to, and why would that be the case? Can you like, give them a call, send them a text, do different things, and like, kind of pinpoint and kind of triage or whatever other word, sort of optimize, what you're doing versus kind of just, everything you do is just sort of these massive, generic, uh, things. It's like, yes, and I would hope that anyone is doing, a little bit more than that, but yeah, so I think yeah, and I guess that now it's also ringing in my head of just sort of like, because this comes up in a lot of ways in life, is that idea of like time, you know, the privileged few, people who are, just have more resources, are going to have more time
Mhm.
because like they don't have to work, and like they can just sit there for a very long time and, try to figure out the answers or different things like that. But it's like, I'm from an underrepresented background. I have to work full time. I've got family obligations and all this. And I'm trying to figure out, am I able to, find a program that's going to be a good fit for me, and how do I apply and get all these other questions answered? But it's like, yeah, I don't have the luxury of time amidst everything else going on to, um, just sit with this. So, that's something that I've thought a lot about, is just sort of the time debt as that comes in. Now we're trying to, especially just because it's such a zeitgeisty thing of just sort of like, develop workforces, get people more gainful employment and, tech careers and all that. It's like, great. Yeah. We've got a lot of this sort of like infrastructure set up and different programs and options and stuff like that. But like, you're probably still not going to reach the people that you're looking for if like, yeah, there's just sort of this cumbersome obstacle course between, this person and them applying confidently to the right program, and they have all their questions answered and all those sort of things. So, um, yeah, I mean,
Well,
that the technology is sort of the tool to help kind of bridge that gap, however it sort of shows up.
yes, and I'm happy you brought that up because technology is just the tool, right? And so you mentioned, texting students, calling students. I am fortunate enough with my alma mater to have a relationship where I mentor some students, and four of the five seniors that I work with, they hate texting. They don't want to text. They want to call, which is very atypical. That is not normal for our clients. That is not normal, I think, even for my alma mater. But I think it's important to treat students like individuals. But going back to what you were saying too about these cumbersome processes, extrapolate that out now, right? So a student has graduated from the institution. They're working. They may or not have a family. They're doing all the other things in their life. Like, what do you think is going to happen when that institution sends the annual giving note or sends them an email or a post on social media? Hey, giving day is coming up this October. They're going to tune it out, right? Because their experience was, yeah, I was one of many. School didn't make me feel special. Didn't feel like I gained anything different than I would have at any other institution. So we should constantly aim to minimize those experiences as much as possible and make things as personal and delightful as we can, which obviously easier said than done, right? It's hard to do at scale. Using something like Cadence makes it a little bit easier, but that should be our end goal.
Yeah, so I think we kind of answered the back half a bit, sort of the best practices, when it comes to the student outreach. And we could certainly, I'm sure we're going to keep kind of, sort of bleeding that into our conversation here. But I kind of want to, I'll bounce back to you, Greg, for this. But so we're talking a lot about sort of the current landscape, the problems, and some of the solutions and stuff. So say, an institution has some gaps that they have bridged by, any which way. What do you see as sort of the outcomes of effective student alumni, outreach and everything? I think you're sort of alluding to that, so I kind of want to build on that, Mike. But Greg, what do you see as some of those tangible outcomes when you're sort of implementing, more effective sort of outreach and communication process at a university?
It's not a fun answer for someone with this problem because I think it's not one channel. Obviously, we have a texting and engagement platform. I'd love to tell you that fixes everything. But I guess the term omni-channel has been used a lot, but students aren't going to answer their phone. We know that. If you're listening to this and you're calling students as the only way to get a hold of them, that doesn't work by now. Everyone knows that doesn't work by now. So, texting works, but also email works. And you have to use those channels with each other in order to reach someone. You have to send a text and tell them they just got an email, or send an email and ask if they got that text, or have the chatbot there and make sure that when they come to your website, they know, okay, this is how my question could be answered. And that chat needs to give someone, give out the text number to someone. You need to hit as many channels as possible to guide people, through the process, because it's an impossibly complex process. And even when the folks are already at your institution learning, they're going to have questions. So you have to keep it up. I think, I don't know, I'm kind of neurotic and I hate myself. So I'm always worried that I'm talking too much and asking too many questions and bothering people. So it's tough for me to get into this mindset, but you're not over texting someone if you're helping someone. You're not giving them too many emails. Even if they never reply to a single email, as long as they're not unsubscribing, they're fine. They know where to get that information. They're going to search key in their inbox and find what they need because they know you're constantly bombarding them with emails. Now, I mean, not 5 a day, but if you're sending fewer than 1 a week, you're probably not serving your constituents. So it's a lot of communication. Make it short. Always make yourself available for questions, no matter what medium you're using. And that includes letters. How impactful would it be to get a letter in the mail? Be creative, pay attention to what's working at your institution, of course, and just make sure you're using more than one channel to get a hold of them. I hope that, it's such a big answer, but I hope that was at least a broad stroke.
Well, yeah, I guess because, that kind of builds off, sort of the best practices kind of piece. And I'm just curious. So, say an institution is doing kind of that omni-channel approach, what's the impact of that, tangibly? I don't know what you all see as you sort of work with people, institutions when they're making shifts like this, because clearly they're something isn't working here because, student retention or satisfaction or, whatever else just isn't where we want it to be, or alumni giving, whatever it might be, so when they're doing this, how does it sort of show up, I guess? Because I know it's not going to be sort of just flipping a light switch and it changes overnight, but I don't know, just anything that sort of gets to, sort of the impact of this, because I think there's some of those quantitative pieces that I'm sure you can measure, but then some of the other pieces of just how sort of a institution runs and how students feel and those sort of things. So I guess any anecdotes or reflections on that, and Greg, if you want to keep with this, or
we were pointing at each other because we both have answers for this. I'm going to let Michael first because he pointed first, but yeah.
There are very specific instances where clients have decreased ad drop. They've increased retention. They have increased the number of deposited students. They've decreased melt. They've raised more dollars, and all those things are possible. You can find them all on mongooseresearch.com. And there's micro stories too as well. There's an institution in the upper Midwest where a director, I believe, of the nursing program, along with the director of student retention, actually texted a student during their cancer treatment process and help the students navigate deadlines and essentially graduate on time, which is pretty incredible. And those are the stories I'm most proud of. But I think taking a step back, whether it's Mongoose and buying our platform Cadence, or any of our competitors, any CRMs you're using, before you invest in that technology and really use it, you should think about the goal first and think about, okay, like what do we really want to improve on our campus? Because whether it's Cadence, whether it's, like I said, any of our competitors, you should be using that tool to drive towards a particular goal, and that goal should ideally be measurable for the institution. And then from there, you can tweak the messages you send. If it's cadence and texting, you can tweak what we call playbooks, but essentially what the bot will do on a website to achieve those particular outcomes or those particular goals.
See, I love that answer, Mike. Mike just speaks well. I get a little more emotional and dramatic with my answers because I've spent an entire life failing or not trying. And you think about that, like, are you afraid to do something? Do you not just understand something? And the examples Mike's talking about, and we hear it from schools all the time, like, oh, this student sent, I sent a text to a student saying, hey, there's still time to apply. And they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I can still apply. And there's still 8 steps. And they texted them through those 8 steps in one afternoon. And they see that student on campus all the time. So we have examples of that, but it really is one text that can make a big difference. One email, one outreach by, because people quit when they don't understand something. It's so easy. There's so much going on in life that you can just quit. I've done it myself a bunch of times. That's how I ended up at Mongoose, just constantly failing at everything. That's a joke. I was trying to make Mike laugh. No, but you go through your life and you just need guidance or direction or clarity on something. And one text that's just offering help, even if they don't take you up on it right away. It really does make a difference. And now I'm hoping in post-op you're adding like dramatic music to what I'm saying to make it
Yes.
Yeah.
Justin, may I add some stats to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yesterday we have a colleague of Greg and I's, Jake, and I asked him for some stats because there's going to be a couple of meetings where I had to cite things pretty quickly. And I asked him, I was like, Jake, how many texts do our clients actually send out? So we have just under 750 colleges and universities. We've sent 49.7 million texts, and we've reached 12.7 million students. And of those 12.7 that we've reached, 2.1 million have responded. So there's at least one response. And so a lot of times when I work with our client institutions, one of the first questions they ask is, well, what's a good response rate? And, response rate, those sorts of metrics really don't matter because there's going to be texts that say, Dustin, just a reminder, this thing's due. There's no need for there to be a back and forth. And then there's others where it's like, there's an institution in the Midwest, as an example. I love this use case. They will send out to all their new students, whether they are first-year students, transfers, et cetera. They'll text them and say, hey, using a GIF or an emoji, how was your first week of class? And again, not so much on the quantitative side of things where that can be measurable, but you could identify the students that, send the thumbs down emojis or, Robert Downey Jr. eye roll GIFs, memes, whatever the case might be, and start to identify those students and say, okay, how can we re-engage those students, or where did we lose them, or how can we keep an eye on those? And in the same way, making sure that the students who were like me were like on a sugar rush their first year of college and were just so excited and want to join every club and love the freedom of being away from home. And we can like monitor those students and say, okay, it's great that you want to run for all these student organizations and write for the student newspaper, but like you got to keep the GPA up, and we're going to help guide you through this process so you don't spin yourself into a disaster either.
Something else that I really like to I also just some like reflecting on just sort of I appreciate you navigating those numbers. That was a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's like such a huge scale and like so much to kind of analyze, even just with sort of like a simple set of numbers of just sort of the quantity of how much is being sent out. But then like, yeah, not everything requires a response, but just even seeing how often they do is interesting. But yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot to be excited for in the space, because I think clearly the work that you're doing is having that impact across the board, from kind of the beginning of a student's journey to the end and after they graduate. So I'll stick with you first for this one, Mike. Just like, what are you excited for with this space? Like you are just waist deep in it, kind of thinking and talking about it all the time, and seeing these really great outcomes and everything. But just sort of looking ahead to the future, what are you really excited for?
So text and chat really, and when you look at the CRMs that have texting and chat features built into them as part of their feature suite, so many of them started through enrollment management, started through financial aid, registration processes, retention, those sorts of areas. And while that's fine, that all works, there's so much potential, and I think probably better use cases in areas that people don't think about. So having faculty use a system like ours to text their students so they're not using their personal device and they have that sense of privacy. Using chatbots in athletics, right? So I call into, I don't know, we'll say University of Delaware, and I'm curious if I've donated enough to get tickets to this section at Tubby Raymond Stadium, etc. So instead of calling the office, being on hold, getting transferred 3 times, just going on, and I'm sorry, Dustin, as an alumnus, what is their athletic website? Is it like go
tubbyraymond.gov?
right?
Yeah. I think it's maybe something like because with the Blue Hens, like
Right.
yeah, I'm not sure like how they maybe like if it's like just like gobluehens.com or something.
Yeah. So instead of, you making all these phone calls and, trying to find out all this information, just going to, gobluehens.com and seeing like, okay, how much I give this year? How many more dollars am I away from, getting the lacrosse package? Or, hey, where did most of the money go, from this particular giving society? So I think there's so many more use cases, and I think those use cases are probably even more intuitive than the ones that we built the technology for now.
And I'll just quickly clarify, just because I don't want anybody to get mad at me.
Yeah.
They just got bluehens.com, so good on them.
Oh.
No weird, URL. So bluehens.com would be where I go, but
There you go. They should
sure.
sponsor the show now, Dustin, now that we're, publicizing.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see.
My answer, like technology, yes. They're just being in our buildings and seeing like that 4 people can sit in a room for a week and develop like this really cool integration. It just leads you to believe that there's a lot more coming out technology wise from everyone working to improve their higher ed products and fixing problems. That part's cool. I also think that just institutions themselves are going to have to change their thinking. And so it's kind of the whole landscape could change, education as we see it, because of like the frustrations and the trepidations people have. Like the entire industry could be changing, and we're here for it. We get to help guide it. We get to help see it. We get to see the outcomes, better outcomes that students can have, because it really does feel like going to the beginning of the show when you mentioned the pandemic, those changes now, everyone knows those changes have to be made. So we get to see them happening now and be a part of it. So that kind of excites me.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting though, too, because yeah, like with, everything that was accelerated and everything that was sort of like uncovered through the pandemic, it's like it sort of laid bare a lot of problems and also sort of accelerated change that was already happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you had all these people that were sort of ahead of the curve with, various practices, and then the folks who are sort of playing catch up. But then it's like, I know for me, it's just like kind of with what you're saying, people who are sort of like really putting their heads together to solve problems. And it's also like, okay, for you who is sort of like the naysayer for a very long time, we're sort of forced into this, and now just having to maybe kind of reckon with like, okay, I guess we have to sort of rethink our, outreach strategy to students. So like, then it's like, okay, well, how are we going to kind of balance out this equation with somebody like that who is maybe sort of, looking for new tools and new processes and, all those sort of things. So I think that's something that's really interesting with, work that folks like you do. So as we wind down, though, we do like to ask kind of two standard questions. So I'll stick with you, Greg, first for this one. So it could just be like a thing or, whatever comes to mind of resources to share. Obviously we'll be sharing out direct links to Mongoose and your podcast and ways to connect with each of you. But just anything else, books, articles, other podcasts that you'd want to share and give kind of a tip of the hat to. So we'll start with you, Greg, and then go over to...
Sure. Well, Michael, punch me if I don't say FYI. That's our podcast. Of course, everyone listening knows of the Chronicle. Great writing, not the most fun, but it's the reference for higher education. Mm-hmm. So everyone's in on that. Higher ed, Inside Higher Ed is a great resource, but I want to just give a different perspective, and that's just looking outside of higher ed content for advice on communication and outreach. Kind of expand what you look into and know what your students are into, so you can relate to them and solve their problems. So that's not a direct answer. That requires a little bit of homework, but find out what your students are, where they're talking, what they're into, and make sure that you're participating in those circles, seeing what's out there that students are paying attention to, so what their problems are and you can help solve them.
Well, yeah, that makes me think of just sort of like social media in general. You can kind of like either like jump in or places where it makes sense, but also just take cues from just sort of like, obviously there's just always been such a pressure on social about, video or short form video and different things like that. But something else I'll put as a cherry on top to your answer, Greg, though, is like, one, like look to others for how they sort of like do their communication and outreach, but then also like look to others to see how they're talking about higher ed. Because I think like the Daily podcast just like released an episode about college price, which I'm interested to listen to, but it's like, oh, okay. Like, things that are sort of like boiling up into like national headlines and stuff like that versus just like, the many of us who get the emails from the Chronicles and Inside Higher Eds of the world, sort of like, the more niche kind of industry press that's like tailored to us, but then like, when it sort of bleeds over, it's interesting to see as well. But
that is neat. The kids love the higher ed. It's getting big. So other outlets are covering it.
Go ahead, Mike.
So first of all, the great call in the Daily. That's the Ron Lieber episode, correct?
Maybe, I just saw it in my feed, but it probably is. It just came out as the recording of this episode. So.
Immediately check it out. It's fantastic. He talks about sort of the misconceptions about price and where the challenges actually lie, because obviously for your listeners and for you this, but maybe some people don't. The sticker price of an institution is not at all what a student will typically pay. And so Ron gets into that. It's really well done. Yes, obviously echoing FYI selfishly, I think we do a great job. Your podcast is great. I've listened to a bunch of episodes.
Thank you.
That was assumed. Now you make me look bad because I didn't mention that.
Yes. And I'll say too, with our clients, I find so many of the best practices that I've had a hand in developing came from us seeing something an institution did and going, oh my, that's genius. We should have thought of that. And me kicking myself for about 5 minutes, and then me picking up the phone and saying, hey, Justin, can we steal this idea? It was great. And 99% of the time, institutions are, yeah, of course. Please share that idea. So if you're working with Mongoose, if you're working with any CRM, any other engagement tool, you should talk to them and say, hey, are there other institutions, similar size, similar mission to us? What are they doing? Can I talk to them? Do you have conferences? Can we all meet up at a conference? If we're all going to NACAC in, a week, can we, grab coffee together? Because, the word college comes from the Latin read together.
Oh my goodness.
What?
We almost made it a whole episode without you speaking Latin.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, that's, we are, we're all in this industry together. This industry has lots of challenges, and the only way we're going to get through those challenges is if we embrace less of the competition and more of the collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, I do just appreciate how collaborative industry higher education is. So, yeah, I think, whether it's just at your institution, like I've always had really good experiences with that of sort of, getting together little like GM sessions to kind of ideate on things or, I mean, I'm excited to get back out to conferences. I think we're seeing, more and more having kind of more robust in-person experiences than also supplemented with, online sort of tracks and everything. So I'm also just excited for that to kind of be a thing now. But so we'll wrap up though with our final question, asking for final thoughts or calls to action on our discussion today to end the episode. So we'll start with you on this one, Mike, and then close with Greg.
Every message you send out, everything you do should count. It should be impactful. So those messages, the chatbots you use, etc., should be as personalized as possible. You should avoid the quote unquote blast, whether that be email, texting, etc. You should really try to target your audiences and make sure that if you are encouraging people to go to a football game, that those people actually like football and don't hate football. So you should make sure that you are segmenting your audiences appropriately and sending messages in a timely manner for students, alumni, faculty, staff, whoever it's going to be, to do what you need them to do.
Mine's be brief. If someone is interested, they'll ask a follow-up.
And that's where we'll end. Yeah. Because I was like, ooh, should I ask a follow-up?
It's really insulting that you didn't ask a follow-up.
And again,
it means you're not interested.
You can put this through post. You can do whatever you need to do.
Right. I can create reality myself.
Right.
I definitely agree. Because I think that's what like I've always done is always try to like flow from like what someone says to sort of keep the conversation going. Because like it shows interest and I mean, there's going to be those times where if you send a brief, really concise, clear message and, it is like compelling someone to take an action, then it's like they might just take that action. And like if it's clear, then they don't need to necessarily follow up. But I think, if you're reaching out to the right person in the right time, the right way, like you're saying, then you likely will get a response because you are showing interest in, sort of how things are going for them and, if they need some support and stuff. But we'll let those final thoughts and calls to action kind of linger and marinate for folks. I think they're really great, and just appreciate you both for hanging out and sharing all that you did, and for just all the knowledge and fun that you brought to this episode. This is really great, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Dustin. It was awesome.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you, Dustin, for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.